I had the great pleasure today of interviewing Irene Clements, who, from my point of view, represents all the good things that have been going on, all the changes, all the support, all the new ways of looking at the needs of children and families connected together through foster care. So, Irene, it is a real pleasure for me to be able to interview you today. And
Thank you.
we were both laughing about the fact that we're both retired, but really old social workers never retire. We just always have a new cause. So I'll be interested to hear some of your new projects as we move through the interview. I wanted to just ask you to begin with to tell our viewers a little bit about the things that stand out as important to you in your career. Tell us 5 things or more, if you want, about what you've been devoting your life to as a professional over these last many years.
Wow. Well, I started out really young, while still actually in high school, working during the summers at a Head Start program. It was back in the early days, in the very beginning, where it was only during the summer. And then after I graduated from high school, I went to college a year and fell in love, and that ended. And so I got a job, then Head Start turned to be a full-time program. And so I was working at Head Start. And after, I guess, about a year, they approached me to say that they were having a pilot program over the whole United States. It was in San Antonio, Texas, to serve children with special needs, ages 3 to 5. And the special education teacher that they hired to do that program, not only run it, but be hands-on, quit on them unexpectedly after like 6 months. And they asked me if I would go take that class. And I have to tell you, I knew nothing about disabilities, right?
Yeah.
And, but I said, well, I thought if they got confidence in me to at least manage the kids until they can hire, the next special ed teacher, okay. And I had 15 children. I had 2 assistants, 2 young ladies, and we fell in love. And I learned so much from those children and their families, and the professionals who would come in and provide therapy and things for them, that I knew that my major in college was pre-med, and I knew that that's really not where I wanted to continue on, that I had to do something with children. And in particularly, because I've worked with Head Start, with regular kids, I guess you'd call them, these children just captured my heart. Oh. And so that kind of started the process of changing my whole point of view about the future.
Wow.
And so, I did that, and then we adopted our first daughter as an infant. And one of the things here in Texas, at least, the law was if you were going to adopt a child, one of the parents had to stay home.
Oh.
And so I quit my job that I loved dearly, because I had my new daughter, right? Mm-hmm. And then a little later, after that, I was asked to work with early childhood intervention program for the birth to 3 kids, and was director of a county program here in Texas, and loved, again, working with those children that all had unique special needs at very young age, and their families, and helping them cope with and understand the needs of their children and keep those families together. So I did that, and then, everything I've done has kind of led to the next thing. After that, I was asked to manage home and community-based services, which is a Medicaid 1915Z waiver program for people with intellectual disabilities, other disabilities, and some mental health issues as well, from birth to to adulthood, right? And so I did that over 20 counties, and managed 200 staff that
Oh,
worked with these folks in small group homes or with the children in their families, and loved that. Then the state developed an in-home and family support program, and I was asked to implement that within that 20 county area. Did that for a couple of years, built a strong program, and then was asked to move to the state office in Austin and manage the entire program statewide. So I did that, and then from there, I became the vice president of foster care services for the largest child placing agency in Texas. At that time, it was Lutheran Social Services of the South. They now go as Upbring. And I have been doing some consulting work from them recently. But, you know, I did that for 15 years, and that's where I had most of my experience with what it takes to manage foster care. We became foster parents early on in this story, and for 27 years we fostered. And so being a foster parent for that long, and then working for an agency that was also doing foster care was a unique experience for me. Our program was very large. You know, my budgets were usually every year about 32 million. Because it was a big state of Texas, and we had programs all over Texas. And during that time was also when I was supervising folks that were our domestic adoption people and our international adoption staff.
wow.
So I learned so much there as well, right? And then toward the end, I just did their governmental affairs stuff and worked with the Texas legislature and the other advocate organizations in the state in order to get things done here. Then during that time, I was also part of the National Foster Parent Association and had been for many years, and became the president of the board of directors in the association. I guess it was in 2012. And in 2015, they hired me as their executive director. And so that's what I did up until the end of December 2021 when I retired.
Yeah.
So every job I had, it was like, I'm a very faith-filled person. Every job I had was like God said, okay, I gave you that one, so you're ready for your next one. And here's the one I want you to have. Each one built on the other. And I started out totally ignorant. And wound up, I like to say now, pretty wise on a lot of things that have to do with children and families, and helping them to succeed and try to have some kind of well-being within their families.
What a journey, both personally and
I know there's more than 5 things, but that's what it took to get me here.
Yes, and I think for our legacy figures, that stepping stone experience, you know, building on knowledge, becomes really the essence of the story. Gathering wisdom as you go and applying it and seeing what works and what doesn't work. All of that is the essence of becoming a legacy.
Yeah. The interesting piece of that is I never did get my degree.
Yes, you did. So, you got it in life. I did.
And so but back in those days when I started all that, you didn't have to have a bachelor's degree or more to take some of these jobs. And then by the time they started wanting that, they'd have some of them go, well, I had 10 years experience. Well, I'd have that. So I would still qualify for the position to be considered. And so times are different now, though. You know, it's not as easy for folks to be able to do that.
Right.
Although I think, you know, wherever you're at, you start there. And if everybody requires a bachelor's degree, then that's what you do. And then you start building your resume again. And for me, I never wanted to really leave any of those jobs. That was the thing. It was things that occurred in our lives that made that happen.
Yes.
I'm truly grateful for every experience I had.
Were there people along the way, Irene, who were in the field, maybe leaders at that time, who you looked to for wisdom that kind of gave you the leg up? Who were your mentors?
Well, my mentor through those early years when I was working with children and adults with disabilities and disabling situations was a woman named Ora Houston. And I loved her. I still love her. She was so wise and understood people so well. And she was a great communicator and teacher. And so I learned from her how to talk to people, how to engage people better. And then I had other mentors through the foster care piece. Gordon Evans from Houston, who was just a mainstay of and wisdom, was probably the biggest mentor I ever had in foster care. And, you know, getting to know those people was my good luck. And they were willing to help me.
Yes.
And because I know Gordon always said, Irene, you want to do so much, and I feel like I can't give you enough because of what you want to do, you know. And I said, but you're so wise and you have so much wisdom, so much more than I will ever have. You know, when you got people like that, and then there have been some others. Jake Terpstra was one of them. He was at the Children's Bureau for years, and you know, folks that just had the good fortune to meet, not only a local and state, but nationally. And then I have to say that Eileen Pasteur, I met her in the early 80s, and we've been friends ever since and colleagues over many occasions, and done a lot of projects together, written some curriculums together and things like that. A wealth of information, heart that just as big as the world is.
Yes.
And she and I now at our ages talk a lot about our children, because we all both have adopted children, and they have needs yet. I mean, they're not independent adults, some of them, and you know, things that we've gone through and are going through now as older, responsible for other adults that are now 50 and over 52. You know,
Yes.
it makes a big difference. And so I'm so grateful for people like that who not only share the passion for the business part of what we do, but have the heart to understand what families are going through and what foster families are experiencing, what adoptive families are experiencing, and how little support there is out there often for those families.
Do you feel that it made you a stronger contributor to the field because you were both in it professionally and living with it personally?
I know it made me better because I understood the calls that I would get, the frantic calls from parents, whether it's was in foster care or before foster care, but parents whose children were ill, you know, or terminally ill, or are very disabled, and or the parents, foster parents who would call, or the bio parents of the kids in my family, you know, that joined our family through foster care, because sometimes we had to parent the parents.
Right, right, right.
They would ever be able to get their kids back. And I understood what they were feeling. I understood the frustrations, and I understood the, you know, feeling of helplessness sometimes. And am I doing any good at all? Am I making any difference at all?
Right.
Because so many times we felt that we weren't. We just couldn't figure out how to meet a child's needs.
Right.
I think, you know, that I've always told people, if you can hang on long enough, even if you only have those kids, you know, a week or 2 years, you're planting seeds every single day, and they're gonna some of them are gonna sprout up and grow to fruition. They won't all sprout probably, but many of them will. And you might never see difference you've made for those children and their families, but they will experience something better because of what you did. And I think that's helped a lot of families plot on, and understand that we don't always know our impact on other people. And oftentimes we feel like we have any at all. And even now, we still, just in the last 4 months, we've had 3 former foster kids who are now in their 30s and early 40s contact us because they found us on Facebook. And,
it's a gift. It's such a
it's
gift.
like they were little kids. I mean, 5 to 12. And we remember you, or my parents always let me keep a picture of you with your phone number on it, and your name. And talking to them is, well, it just makes me feel like I actually maybe did matter,
Yes, and you did. And you did. It makes me wonder, because you're describing such hard work, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And you've mentioned that, you have a husband now who has needs. You have a daughter who's had ongoing needs. You were fostering, you were adopting, you were managing. You mentioned that you have a good spiritual core. What else kind of gave you a larger feel of life, a broader sense of being in the world than just your work? And I shouldn't say just the intense work that you were doing, and the parenting that you were doing, and being a mate to somebody who was there to support you and be in it with you. Are there some other aspects of your life that kind of sustained you through these years?
Yeah, family is one. Boy, was I blessed. I had the best mom and daddy, grandparents. My parents were married 60 years before my dad passed away.
Wow.
My mother's parents were married 60 years before the first one passed away, and my dad's parents were married 56 years before the first one passed away. My husband and I have been married 56 years, and we'll be 57 this year.
Oh,
And
congratulations.
my mother was one of 10 children, so I had lots of family, lots of cousins, lots of aunts and uncles, very close knit. Had this, never moved, lived in the same house on the same farm until I left to go to college. I mean, I had such stability, and all these people around us that I could see, my grandparents I could see every day if I wanted to. They were that close, both sets. And that did something good for me. The other thing that was really important that I think, and sometimes people don't think about it, but it was the things that I was involved in before I became an adult. And I was a 4-H member. I remember my mom just like, you got to do that, Irene, And so at 9 years old, I started, and I learned to sew, and I learned to cook, and I did public speaking and all of the demonstrations. And I learned how to talk in front of people, not to be nervous. Well, I get nervous, but not to be afraid of doing it, And I did that until I was out of high school. But it laid the foundation for a lot of confidence.
Yes.
And that I knew that if something came up, I could figure out how to tackle it and deal with it. Because my mom and dad wouldn't do any of the work for us like some kids did, their parents did. We had to do it ourselves. And I know when I was 13, my mother said, okay, Irene, you're 13 now, you know how to sew really well. From now on, you make all your own clothes.
Wow.
And I did. And, there was a self-confidence that comes from that as well. I knew how to cook. I knew how to sew. I knew how to buy groceries. I knew how to do things. I wasn't so afraid to start life.
Good.
Living my life. And that's one of the things I'm just feel a lot of sorrow for now for kids, because they're not learning those things.
Right.
And I don't know where we're going to go with all of that, but I know when kids would come join our family through foster care, and I'd say, okay, let's figure out what we're going to eat this week. What do you mean? I said, well, let's talk about the menu so we'll know what kind of grocery list. What? They weren't doing that. They learn how to do things.
Yeah.
And this one she's 40, who contacted us about a month ago. And she said, I hope it's okay if I still call you mama. And I said, that's fine with me. And she said, one of the things I always remember is you showed me how to cook. And I can cook, and my kids are happy because I know how to cook. And all of that kind of stuff, But if I hadn't had those experiences growing up, I wouldn't have had the confidence to step forward as young as we did to start all these things. It would have been a longer process for us.
That's so helpful. And when I think about your work with the National Foster Parent Association, what do you feel the biggest challenges and needs are for foster families today? What don't they know? What do they need? If you could give a little boost to the future, what would you have to say about that?
I think the workforce that recruits and retains these families has to be better, has to be better trained, more informed about what families really do, even to shadow a family for a week or two each. I don't know, but the workforce turnover is incredible. They're not prepared when they're given a caseload.
Yeah.
Frightening things, and you think that should all be better by now. It's not. I hear it every day. Okay. And there has to be some effort, true effort by everybody involved, including the people who make all the rules, that there needs to be something done to make sure there's a workforce that understands what foster families do, what it takes, that they're volunteers, that there are no holidays, there are no weekends off, there is no vacation time, there's no paid health insurance from the job, there's none of that stuff, right?
Right.
So that they understand the expectations that when they say, oh, well, you got to have this kid here on such and such a day at such and such a time, you said, well, but I have 3 other children in foster care with me, and that's double booking on somebody else, because nobody ever talks to one another, right?
Right.
And then they're mad at you because you're going to make their day a bit worse, because then they got to pick up the child or do something. And so you can't split me 2 ways. I can't be, in 2 towns at one time, because we live in the country. We have 3 towns around us. They could go all over the place, right? There is the other thing I think that really is harmful, that why we don't have more people wanting to foster, is the media and how they still continue to portray, most of the time, foster care as a terrible thing.
Yes.
And Eileen and I have talked a lot about this, and there's a whole lot of things going on around words matter. Strength-based words and expressions are really important.
Right.
And when we, as a part of the system, use words that are derogatory about what we do and about the kids we serve, well, what do we expect?
Right.
So I'm really a champion for helping everybody within the system, including the media, to learn that there are different ways to talk about the people in the system and the work that's done and what happens to children and families. We've got to start somewhere to show that, yes, there can be some things in foster care that are not good, but sometimes it's better the alternative than what they were living with, and nobody wants them to be in foster care. But if they are, then the families who take those kids have got to be supported, have a lot of communication, be understood, and that's, after all these years, it's still not that way. Now, there are pockets. There are agencies out there that contract with CPS programs across the country that have really put a lot of effort into this and are doing a good job of supporting their families and providing them with the mentoring that they need, the hotline that they need, whatever it is they have to have in order to get support, in order to maintain, some well-being within their family.
Yeah.
And I'm not just speaking of for the children that are in care, foster care. The whole family has to remain well. You can't bring well-being to a child if you don't have well-being yourself.
Right. Right.
And that's what people don't seem to understand. Well, let's just dump more kids on these families. Don't tell them the truth about what their needs are. And they can be mad at them when they say we can't meet their needs. Please come get them. Those are the kinds of things that drive me crazy. And I don't get sleep at night because I still wonder how in heck, after 50 years, how with the Foster Parent Association talking about these things, still experiencing these things.
It's heartbreaking. I always think about our colleague Kay Donnelly, who literally had her social workers move in with families for a week at a time and help them to cook and sit and eat and see when the tensions came up around the kitchen table. And because she wanted her workers to know what it was like to live in those homes.
That's exactly right.
And I've been saying for years that, if you're going to do the work, you ought to foster or adopt yourself and see what that feels like to have a home study, a family assessment done, and to have social workers in and out of your house, because until you've lived that, which I have as well, you really don't get it. And so you're so right. Thank you for addressing all that. It makes all the difference in the world. So tell us, as we kind of come to the end of the interview, tell us, you're retired, but none of us really retire because we carry a lot of knowledge that's still useful. It doesn't get as outdated as people think because we still are struggling with the same old,
we are.
I would say. So what are you doing now in your retirement? Tell us what you're doing.
I am doing some consulting work. And so I figured out like a month after I retired, this ain't gonna work. I gotta have more, I've got to be involved in this. So there's plenty to do, but not in this realm. And I couldn't just cold turkey stop it, right? And so I kind of put myself back out there to do some consulting work, and was very pleased that I've had several opportunities last year, and currently are working on 2 consulting things now. But I'm very involved in a project again with Eileen Pasteur to have a timeline of the 50 years of the National Foster Parent Association, and some of the timeline before that led up to why it was decided by the Children's Bureau and CWLA that they needed to be a national organization that represented the foster families. And so we're about finished with that project. And then, I have some colleagues and we're writing some op-ed pieces and hoping to get some attention. And I have to say, it's kind of nice not to be somebody's employee, and not to be fostering anymore, because now I can say what I've wanted to say many times and couldn't. Right? I mean, come after me now. I don't care.
Right.
And that's terrible, but that's the way it is with me. And so I'm hoping that maybe we can get some traction from some of that stuff. And then I serve on some boards and of directors and advisory councils and things like that. So I'm part of the Safe Coalition for Human Rights, which is an international human trafficking organization. I'm on their board. I'm the chair of the Every Child Incorporated board here in Texas, where we have the state contract to take children and get children out of group living situations and into families back home if possible, and if not, with resource families, and find the funding mechanisms for that to happen. A wonderful, wonderful program. I'm on the Centene Foster Care Advisory Council, and work with them and provide, some input to them as they do managed care for children in foster care and adoption around the country, and several other things, and other groups. And it's rewarding because it's all still in the same ball game of helping people and wanting to provide some things, even if in this 55 plus senior living complex where we live now. I'm on the safety committee. You can't just, you got to keep people safe. We have a lot of folks here that are quite elderly, although it's not assisted living, that EMS shows up pretty often with they have to cart somebody off to the hospital, and you don't know who to contact or where to go. So we put a whole program together. And so, there's all this stuff. And then I do have to say that I got married at 18. So, it was, I was young and had 1 year of college under my belt. And we found out we couldn't biologically have kids. And that's when we started our adoption process. Our first daughter was not through foster care. It was through an agency. But after that, we decided foster care was definitely what we wanted to do. But for us, it was not the end game to foster and then adopt. For us, it was to really foster kids. And we did wind up adopting 3 more children out of foster care. And so I have 19 grandchildren and 7 great grandchildren with another one on the way. And so our life is full, busy. And, I don't know how blessed we are. How did we get that way to be a childless couple and then have this family? And, kids who were difficult that we adopted. We were told that one would murder people and live in the penitentiary his whole life because he had no conscience, and that kind of baloney. And that the other one was just as ill. And, I kept saying, people are out of your minds, well, they're just the best daddies in the world now, loving husbands and wonderful fathers to all these grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And when I've heard people say, oh, there's no such thing as a miracle. I said, oh, Lord, you just don't look around very, very much, do you? Because I see miracles walking in front of me every time I turn around and look at some of my kids. And it's how do we get there? It's each in our own way. But we never gave up. I know when one of our sons had to go to day treatment, I didn't want him away from home. And so I would drive him 40 miles in the morning at day treatment and go back in the evening and pick him up 40 miles and come back round trip 80 miles each time.
Wow.
Because for us, he was a part of this family. He had to know he was part of this family. He had to be at that dinner table with us and interact with our family. And I wasn't going to put him away somewhere. And he says to me all the time, Mom, you have no idea what that meant. I was being as bad and hateful and mean and awful as I could because I hated myself. And you never let that get in the way. And so it was a hard road to hoe when he tried to stab me in the back one time. I mean, all this kind of stuff, but we made it through. And now this man has this beautiful, beautiful family. And I don't know, how do you get that across to people that the journey may be hard, but the rewards are way better than the hard part was.
Right. Oh, you've left us with such a beautiful ending to a powerful sharing. There's so much to learn from you. And, maybe in some future discussion, we ought to do an interview on how does foster to adopt, becoming a resource family, change the plan? How does it change the landscape? Because my goodness, my discussions with clients are so different today based on that experience
Yes.
of parenting, not knowing if they're going to stay, and then being prepared for them to stay, and the confusion around
Yes.
that. And I'm sure you have so much you could share with us on that
Oh,
particular piece.
a whole lot.
I know. So maybe another time we can
Sure.
revisit with you and get a little bit more in that. But I have to say, there's so much richness in this, and I can relate to so much personally that you're sharing and professionally, and just want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with all the folks that we hope are going to get to hear you because of this interview. So I thank you more than you can even imagine. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.